Okay, let's go ahead and get ourselves started today. Once again, we have another action-packed agenda, and I cannot believe we are so close to the end of the quarter. I'm not sure how you guys are feeling, but with the Thanksgiving break right around the corner, thinking about finishing up some things, there really are very few flash sessions left. And there's a lot we want to try and get accomplished and all that. But still finish up before finals week and all that good stuff, because what we want to do is finish up assignment 4. We're going to give you one last assignment before the break. You'll have a chance to work on that over the break, as well as through that first week, that dead week, something like that. And we'll give you some time in class to actually work on that, because we're going to have you do some things as small groups where it may actually be one of the few times to actually get yourself together, is actually during the class session to do some coordination. So we got a lot of stuff we want to try and accomplish, but we actually are doing pretty good in terms of where we want to be in learning things about building modeling in this quarter. So I think we're feeling pretty good overall. But still a lot to go. So today we're going to talk a little about assignment 4 and questions people have about that, because a lot of questions have come up, and we want to try and clear up any sort of just confusion people have about what to turn in for that. To the bulk of today's session, we want to be talking about MVP modeling. We started with that last time. We were talking about doing plumbing modeling, just started getting into modeling of ductwork systems and like HVAC systems, thinking about how those needed to be designed and put together. Maybe we'll even talk about sprinkler systems today. But what we want to do is move from the idea of modeling all these individual systems into really more the notion of how we integrate our modeling work together and coordinate our modeling work amongst all these different types of models that are being created, so we can figure out, do we have any clashes, do we have any interferences that we need to solve, and really how we go about resolving those things. Okay, so we're heading on down this path, ultimately trying to figure out about how we keep all our work coordinated and hopefully cohesively adding up in a positive sense. Before we go there, though, let me just kind of entertain questions about assignment 4. So, people have had different questions about what to turn in, how far to go with it. The general scheme, let me give you the general scheme, and then we'll see what specific questions come up, was that you would create 2 conceptual models. You'd create a conceptual model for one option, you create a conceptual model for some other option that looks somewhat different. And you put those in design options, super. If you didn't put them in design options, you have just 2 different models and 2 different files. That'll kind of work too. It's really we just need A and B. Okay, and then for A and B, we want to go through and do some conceptual energy analysis just to get some sense of, for that shape and form, how was it doing overall in terms of energy use intensity? Is there anything that would really make us like A versus B or V versus A? Okay, so let's pause there for a second. Let's, in terms of the conceptual energy analysis, I know some people have struggled a little bit to get it to work. Other people seem to have gotten it to work okay. How are you guys doing with the conceptual energy analysis? Has it sort of generally worked for you? No. Okay, so some not at all. How about this? How many people has it not worked for? Okay, just a couple. And it's kind of interesting. And is that because, well, I'm not going to do it the other way. How many people have successfully done this conceptual energy? Okay, a lot. That's interesting, because we're trying to figure out what that common bond is, what it is that's a little bit different. Yes, Sarah?
I know one issue that arose for me is that people having trouble creating the geometry of the core offset.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just put mine to 0 and then it worked fine, but now I have no coordinate.
Okay, but that's that whole thing about that really now you're one big open space, right, which is actually fine as an initial assumption, as opposed to sort of saying that there's inner and outer layers. There's definitely some stuff, simplifying, to see if you can get it to run at all, versus getting the full analysis and a more complex geometry. There's some things where it will break down due to complexity. As you're having troubles with it, is it just sort of logging into the system at all? Or?
It's just crashing. I was on the Y2 computers. I tried, as you suggested, on the YouTube sticker rectangle and modeling that, and I can press conceptual energy analysis, and then I think just crashes.
Okay.
So,
does it run on your computer?
I have a lot of problems on my computer.
Okay. Now we should try, maybe Lottie, can we try, with our model, just running it even on your computer? We're just trying to sort of figure out what it is. Is it exclusively the Y2, E2 computers? There's some things, yeah, go on.
I had 2 issues with it. The first one was that when so that was, I think, because it said that it could create clear geometries, and it's just okay, but then it didn't
Okay.
As far as the and that's where you find that if you go through that, then
Okay, so different things to do. One is make sure you have an Autodesk ID and you sign into the system. Okay, and hopefully that's good, and that would even work in the Y2E2 computers. The whole thing with the core geometries, let's just talk about that, because it's kind of just, it's really whether or not it can figure out what's going on. If you go through and you have some unusual shape, or you have some shape that gets very thin, and it's trying to go through and put some layer all the way around the outside of 12 feet, or whatever it is it's trying to put in there. If your geometry is just such that it can't figure out how to create that, it can say, oh, I can't create core geometries out of this. So the answer of just saying, hey, well, we'll just skip that and treat it as, well, one big open space is fine. Just in the energy analysis checkbox, let me just kind of open that up, show people where you can go through and turn that off. And that should be fine in terms of doing that. For what we're doing, I think the only important thing is that you have consistency between your A and B assumptions. We're not going for an accurate answer as much as a comparative answer. So that's okay, if you're going through and making some simplifying assumptions. But then, if we are having some specific, issues, I think that it's really just a matter of like trying to get it on some different machines and seeing if we can get it to work. So, let me do the core geometry thing. So here we are. I'll rotate that up. I'll make my form. So now, with this thing chosen, I always have to go through and make some mass floors. If it doesn't have mass floors, it doesn't have anything to work with. It's just a mass. It doesn't think that it actually is a building. Then we'll go back into Analyze, Conceptual Energy Analysis, and here's that whole thing about the core offset. So if you set that back down to 0, that seems to help.
So I had to divide perimeter zones unchecked. Doesn't that also make it one big?
It's the combination of the two things. Let's talk about that. Divide perimeter zones. Let's talk about that. Divide perimeter zone says that in the northeast, southwest, that kind of like divides it up into quadrants. So go ahead and not only uncheck that, but also set it to 0 and see if that works. Let's see if we can kind of debug it. It's just always something, and the hard part is trying to figure out, is it something with a service? Is it something with your computer? Is it something with the complexity of your model? And you're never quite sure. But we'll, for this, let's definitely go through and keep on simplifying till we get something that does work. Or even, I think the way Raj even allowed it, like in Piazza, ultimately, hey, if you really just can't get the energy analysis to work, choose the one that you think is going to be best and move on. And because we can always go back and try and figure out why that didn't work at some point, but don't let that be a stumbling block in terms of just getting you completely stalled. Okay, so we'll try to get it to work, but if it's really fighting you, computers fight us sometimes. Just choose one and we'll go on. Okay, so after you choose one, okay, A or B, energy analysis for one, and along the way you probably had mass floors for 1 and mass floors for 2 to kind of compare the two. Okay, the idea is get the information about those two things on a sheet somewhere, save a PDF about the analysis, save that away, but then choose one and only one of your favorites to move forward with. So I'm going to choose B. With B, I'm then going to move forward and say, great, let me put a skin on this thing, let me put some floors in this thing, put a shaft in, depending on whether you're 2, 3, or 4, however far you're going. Okay, but only continue with one of them. Okay, so that's sort of the general flow. So A versus B, just to choose A or B, and then with that one, take it forward and make a real building out of it. Yes?
We don't have to have like interior walls separating out rooms.
Nah. For this one, it's really more about the skin of the building, the big features. If you're, I think for 4 units, go ahead and put the shaft and the stairs in, but leave it all. It's actually the way we do a lot of big commercial buildings. It's a big open shell that will then be divided up into, walls and spaces as the users who are going to occupy that space sort of decide what they want to put in there.
And do we only do the image rendering on one of those?
Yeah. So just because your conceptual mass, it won't really render to much of anything. It'll look kind of like a big, almost transparent box. So just whichever one you chose forward and you put an exterior skin on, do the exterior rendering of that one. Okay. Yes?
Renderings, what kind of renderings do you have a nice to make them and it should be like put a background in them, and if so, where are you going to put that background?
Now you can keep it really simple where you can even just use the sky and stuff like that that comes by default. Any JPEG, we can go ahead and put in the background if you want, but really, you know, just the building's fine. I know in the evening class, if you came to the evening class once, I started throwing some trees and some cars and stuff like that in the rendering just to, I'll continue to gussy it up a little bit to give it a little more context. But for the assignment, yeah, it's really just if you can go through and set a 3D camera and then just use the rendering tool just to, you know, kind of get some sort of sense of really what the building is. Yeah, that's sufficient. That's sufficient. One of the few things I'll warn you about with renderings that may run into you is if you put a curtain system on the outside and there's a lot of panels, but there's no mullions in the curtain system, it may show up like there's a lot of transparent glass. And the solution to that, if you do that, is just go through and put a mullion into it. So, let me kind of even illustrate that real quickly here. So for example, I put this thing in, I'm gonna put a curtain system on the side of the building. Okay, it's looking fine. I'm going to shade it. It's going to look fine. I go through that and say I want to render this now. So what I would do is, maybe go to the View tab. I'll get some nice looking 3D camera. What I like to do is I put cameras down on the ground. I like to have cameras that look like it's when you're walking up to the building, something like that. So I'll put a camera down here. Looking good. Okay, I'm ready to render this thing. So, well, not exactly looking good, but you know, it'll get us through. So I'll say I'm going to render this thing. I'm going to choose the render, turn it up to medium. I'll say render. Of course, allowing that I've set my time and location and all that properly, so the sun's looking good. It's doing its work, it's computing those surfaces, it's figuring out the amount of light. Okay, a couple things going on there. I'm looking at my mass right now. Okay, so I should probably turn that off because it actually is rendering it as a big blue box. Okay, that's not looking too good. Let's go back and show the model. Visibility graphics, oops, cancel that. Visibility graphics, where is that mass? I want to turn that mass off. No, it says it's not in there. So what's so blue? It is there. I know it's there. It's because it's under massing in sight. Out of here. That's still turned on. Okay. There's like a big old plane of glass. Okay.
That's definitely going to be blue.
What's that?
That's definitely
Okay. So I'm going to shade it. I'm going to render it. Re-render this. You're saying, hey, this is kind of anticlimactic. I had a big old curtain wall in there. Looks kind of transparent. In fact, a lot of times you won't even see it because glass is actually pretty transparent in the scheme of things relative to sunlight and stuff like that. Here's what you got to do. If you got something that looks like this, go through and the problem is we got all these curtain wall panels that are just panels. They're just glass kind of joining up against each other. So if you put a curtain system in there and you aren't seeing any dividers, not to worry. What you got to do is go back to the architecture tab and say, I have to do it in a non-perspective view. I would like to put some mullions on this glass, and I'll just put mullions on all the grid lines, so I could choose individual grid lines. Okay. And now, it's going to look so much better. It's got some mullions in there. So now when we do go through and do the rendering, yeah, allowing there was a building behind my sheet of glass, it'll at least get the mullions in there and do that. But we're really looking for just some sort of pretty rough in terms of the rendering. What we're trying to show is just sort of the sunlight hitting the building, a little bit about the material quality. Do you have brick on the outside? Do you have concrete on the outside? Is it all glass on the outside? Just looking for a fairly simple exterior rendering. Okay, so in that spirit, come back over here. Oh, if I went through and, this is not a very pretty building, but I will put it in there just as an example. I'll put some brick on here. Oh, I'll make that the core face exterior on this wall and that wall and that wall. I need to put some sort of floor in here. I'll make a floor here and a floor there. What else do I need? I should probably put a roof on this thing too. Okay, back over to 3D. Show the model. Not too awfully bad. Let me re-render this. Okay, so this is kind of what we have in mind. It really just is enough to show the exterior form, the materials. Now, I was showing in the class the other night, we can go all fun in terms of putting trees in here and people in here and cars in front of the building and stuff like that. And it makes it a much nicer rendering in terms of what's going on. But this is sufficient. If you want to go for trees or something, not to worry, it's easy. I'll do that, then I'll stop. Because I just keep on going on this forever. I'll just say, oh, for example, under massing inside, I can grab some site components. Got some nice trees out here. So I put some trees around the building. Oh, I'm going to do it. I am so bad. I'm going to load in the family and say that I'm going to put in some entourage and put in my favorite people. Okay, so I'll put in some people in front of the building. So who is that? That's Dwayne. And we're going to have Dwayne talking to Laurent. And I'm going to rotate Laurent around so he looks like he's talking a little bit more. That's his nose right there. I'm going to rotate him so he's looking like he's talking to Dwayne. Rotate this. Okay, and now in that same funny sense, there's Dwayne and Laurent right there. So I will render that. Now, it'd probably be better if I put a little bit of ground under my building, but we're going to do okay. A little bit of sky. Dwayne and Laurent are hanging out there. We got some trees going. A little bit of scale, a little bit of context. The reason I show you that, actually notice some interesting things. Notice the trees casting shadows on the building. Notice the effect of actually having people in the rendering, giving you some sense of scale about whether that was a 100-story tall tower or whether that's a 20-story tall building behind them and stuff like that. It's just really very helpful. So, for my simple little building, in the scheme, that wasn't too bad. I don't know. And that's really sort of the level at which we're looking for. We're really looking for something about that simple in terms of the rendering. So you don't need to spend a lot of time in terms of really addressing that, just enough to give us a sense of the building. Okay. Any other questions about assignment 4? Kind of generally good? I think the biggest struggle people tend to have been having is it's the whole design options and what's in A versus B and trying to get that. And then the conceptual energy analysis. I know that's been a struggle for some people just to get it through. But again, if you're getting stuck on that, choose one and go forward, because that's just a small part of the lesson, is that we can use the energy analysis through. And with enough noodling around with your computer and passwords and stuff like that, we'd eventually get it to work. But we don't have forever. So go ahead and get yourself finished up for tonight. Okay, sort of make sense? Beauty. Okay.